Hello, second grade scientists. I said we would talk more about weathering and erosion, and here we are. So let's talk about weathering and erosion. What is weathering? What is erosion? We'll get to that. We're going to start off with a video. I want to know, what do you notice and wonder while this video plays? As it gets started, I'll give you some background and I'll do some noticing and wondering of my own. Maybe you have the same noticings and wonderings. All right, so this is a cliffside in Suffolk, United Kingdom. You'll notice there are flags in 5 lines. They're spaced about a meter apart. And you are seeing one picture per day, every day for a whole year. What do you notice? You can always turn and talk to someone at home or think to yourself. One thing I notice is that there seem to be less flags already. I notice that the color of the cliff face keeps changing. I wonder why. Oh, wow. Sometimes it looks like there's little piles of stuff at the bottom of the cliff, and then other times it looks really smooth. I wonder why that happens. Sometimes the ocean water or the seawater comes up really close to the cliff. Other times it seems farther away. Hmm. I wonder what this has to do with weathering and erosion. I know we're talking about changes to land, so maybe it has to do with how the land changed. What did you notice? What did you wonder? You can always pause the video and talk to someone at home about it, or carry on and let's see what we notice. Let's compare the very first picture from the video to the last. Now, what do you notice? You can tell that the camera is in the same spot because these palm trees and this mound of earth over here is the same. But look at the difference in the sea cliff. I noticed there are no longer any flags in the last picture. I also noticed, look at the difference between the distance of this little structure and the sea cliff versus here. It's much farther away now. There seems to be a lot less land over here than there was over here. I also noticed one last thing. This beach front looks pretty flat up to the cliff. This one looks much steeper between the edge of the water and the edge of the cliff. So again, what does this have to do with weathering and erosion? We have talked about fast land changes and slow land changes. Some changes that the Earth faces are slow and gradual changes. It can often take hundreds of years for something like weathering and erosion to occur. That's how we get landforms like you see here in this picture, or kind of like our sea cliff here in this bottom picture. Here in this picture, we see that a tree is growing through the rocks. And down here, we have a river curling around this big rock formation. All of these landforms that we see were created by weathering and erosion. I know you're still wondering, but what is weathering and erosion? Let's check it out. Weathering is the breaking down of rock into tiny pieces called sediments. This can happen because of water flow, like rivers, wind, ice, and plants. Some examples. The Colorado River has been carving away the rock found in Colorado to create the Grand Canyon. This has happened over millions of years. The flowing water of the Colorado River actually broke down the rock and weathered it away to form the Grand Canyon. Wind can carry small pieces of sediment, like sand, that blow across the face of stones, acting like sandpaper, wearing away the softer inside part of the rock, creating arches like you might see in Zion, Bryce, and Arches National Parks in Utah. So the wind blows sand and weathers away the rock of the stone, creating an arch. This is a picture of Yosemite Valley. It is believed that Yosemite Valley was actually carved by a glacier. Do you remember what glaciers are? They're layers and layers of ice that form up in mountains and then slide down, hoping to find a sea at some point. When that happens, the ice actually breaks apart the rock and can carve out a valley, which is how it is believed Yosemite Valley was created. And I bet you see this around your own neighborhood. I see it in mine. The roots of trees actually grow through the sidewalk, breaking it apart, weathering that sidewalk into smaller pieces. So all of these are great examples of weathering, where you break down rock into smaller pieces. Once those rocks are broken down into the tiny pieces we call sediments, wind, water, and ice can move them to other areas. This movement is called erosion. Some examples are sand dunes. Have you ever seen a sand dune? Have you been to Sand Dune Park? That happens when wind actually carries sand from one location to another, piling it up into a dune. So sand dunes are the result of erosion, the wind carrying sand from one place to another. This is a picture of a mudslide. When there's a lot of soil on a mountain and then there's a lot of rain, that soil gets loose and can slide down the hill. That water is making the soil erode, carrying it from one place, the top of the mountain, down, down, down to the bottom. And in this case, it's actually blocking the road, so cars can't get by. This is a picture of a river. You can see that the river looks dirty, and in fact, it's dumping out sand or clay out into the sea. So water, the flowing water in a river can actually pick up sediments like clay or sand and carry them from somewhere farther inland and deposit them way out to sea or even on the banks of the river. You also see it with flowing water, like in a stream. Not only is this soil and rock and pebbles being weathered by breaking off, but they're being eroded by being carried downstream. So we like to think of erosion as the movement of sediments from one place to another. What it comes down to, weathering breaks down rocks into smaller pieces, and erosion carries those pieces to a new location. I like to think of it as as weathering breaks, erosion takes. All right, my second grade scientists, that's the lesson. Now you're going to work on the worksheet. Weathering or erosion. You're going to decide if each description down here is an example of weathering or erosion. You're going to write either weathering or erosion in the table next to each description. I've given you the definition. Weathering, remember, weathering breaks, the breaking down of rocks into tiny pieces called sediments. Erosion takes. Erosion, the moving of sediments from one place to another. So read each description and decide if it's weathering because it's breaking rock or erosion because it's taking that rock to a new location. Don't forget when you finished your worksheet to upload it to Seesaw before Friday. Excellent work today, second grade scientists, and I'll see you next time.